The genie is out of the bottle. No matter how much you're opposed to something, we're not going to stop AI. It's not going to happen. It's like the internet. It's the same exact thing with AI right now. So if people had a more open mind about the fact that it's inevitable, and so like use it as a tool to achieve the goals that you want, as opposed to treat it like a threat and not use it at all.
My guest today is Grammy-nominated producer, songwriter, and music tech entrepreneur, Sidney Swift. Sidney is a 10 times platinum producer at major credits like Beyoncé, Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj, Drake, Sabrina Carpenter, and many more. In 2019, he started Defient to bridge the gap between music, pop culture, and next-gen technologies. This led to being granted a U.S. patent for inventing secondary device synchronization, a technology used in music and television to layer digital media experiences. He's also the founder of Recoup, which is focused on empowering modern music executives with AI tools for artist development and direct-to-fan engagement. During the interview, we talked about embracing AI in music management and marketing, the unique way he broke into the business, his virtual artist side project, the changing landscape of music creation, and much more. I spoke with Sidney from his home outside of New York City. All right, so let's start here. How does someone who is a music producer suddenly go to getting a technology patent?
It's a great question. So I was producing for 10 years, and all of the songs that weren't getting placed just kept accumulating in a hard drive on the side. And they were always the weirder songs, obviously. So it got to the point where we wanted to figure out how to use them. And me and my manager at the time came up with the idea of releasing a side project, but I didn't want to be the face of it. So we ended up doing like a virtual artist idea, similar to like the Gorillas. At the time, it was really early, back in 2016, 2017. So nothing really like that, but since the Gorillas. And from there, we got a record deal with Atlantic. And because I had all the production and the studio and songwriting on lock, I ended up just using the advance to hire developers to help us build out the infrastructure and the technology side of the project that it was required. And that's how I kind of got into the tech side of things. It was always like a passion, almost like a hobby. But, when we dove into that project, it really kind of amped it up. And because it was a virtual artist, it couldn't say no. So the creative direction was kind of like, let's play around, throw a bunch of things at the wall, see what sticks. We did some music video games. We did some stuff with motion capture. And that's how I ended up getting the patent. Was we were just releasing like a music video game, and it was just like this intuitive way of synchronizing YouTube music videos to iPhones, and yeah, so that's kind of the story of what led me to the tech patent.
But now, when I read bios and things about you, music producer doesn't come first; it's entrepreneur. So you've obviously reinvented yourself. You made a switch. Right?
I have, I like to say I now produce as a hobby, which is kind of how I started in the beginning. And I focus more on building tech and helping artists grow their brands and develop their fan base. I think I'm much more passionate about that now. My production career, while I still kind of work on some albums when they come, or if it's friends or artists that I really truly believe in, it's not what I'm solely focused on anymore.
It's funny. That seems to be a common theme. There's so many people I know that kind of start in one angle of the music business and then they'll focus somewhere else eventually. I don't know if it's boredom or, if it's an OCD thing or what, but it just seems that it's like a natural evolution almost.
Yeah, it happened to me. I just got to the point where, well, there was two things, I guess. It was, just getting more inquisitive about the tech side of stuff and the potential there. And then I had a kid, and, my entire world flipped upside down from doing sessions until 8 a.m. to, okay, I can't do that anymore. So we need to figure out a new time schedule. So like those kind of two things merged into me just kind of focusing more on the tech side of stuff. But I'm still very passionate about production. I'm still very passionate about the creative process and helping creatives. I mean, that's the world I come from. I just think that the way that we're going to create looks a lot different in the next 5 years. And, I think there's something to be said about getting on the right side of that early on, and I'm kind of glad once I started to dive into the possibilities with AI. I was like, man, I'm glad my full-time job isn't production anymore, because I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Well, let's go there for a second. So you said you feel that things are going to change a lot, music creation in the next 5 years. So how do you see that going?
It's really hard for me to say. I like to use or I like to liken it to like when a new technology comes out. If you look at like, uh, when rock was created around plugging in an electric guitar, when hip hop was created, when turntables became sampling instruments. I feel like we're at a similar moment in time with AI, where this technology is about to usher in an entirely new way of creating music. And with that, an entirely new genre and sound that comes along with it, and the way kids are going to start using it to express themselves. And I just don't think anybody's ready for it. And I'm not really sure where the sound is going to go and where we're going to end up. I just know it's going to be, if you would have asked somebody in the 60s, hey, what's rap sound like? Like nobody would have, could have even thought of where it was going to end up.
Yeah. Well, but you seem to be embracing that, though, as opposed to a lot of creatives that have a giant pushback.
I am embracing it as much as possible. I think it's the future. Like the genie's out of the bottle. It's taken the ability to create something out of nothing from what used to take me 12 hours in a studio with other people involved into something that I could get done in 5 minutes. And like the power of that is so exponential in terms of scale, right? Like when I look at from a production standpoint, once you get your music to a certain level of quality, I feel like it becomes a numbers game, where how many shots on net can you shoot? And if you make 1,000 beats, 10% will get written to, 10% of that will be good, 10% of that will get cut. The power laws, end up coming into play. And there's only so much songs and ideas you can create per year as a artist making music or a producer making music with collaborators. AI completely shatters the way that is traditionally thought about, where I can take an idea and create 1,000 variations of it in a day. And so the power law becomes completely different, right? If I'm shooting 1,000,000 shots on net versus 1,000, what does that look like? I'm not sure, but I think there's a good year or two right now where producers and songwriters and artists can arbitrage that opportunity, because not many people are using it like that.
I think one of the things that people aren't considering, though, is copyright. And the fact that there's only so many ways that you can go that are appealing, at least to our Western culture. So there's only so many melodies that appeal to us, so many chord changes that appeal to us, so many beats. And therein lies a big problem. If you can create things quickly, everybody kind of creates eventually the same thing, and there's a copyright issue. How do you feel about that?
I have a different approach than most producers. I am all for the free use of ideas. I've always been a proponent of sampling. I also don't think that if somebody uses a sample, they should get or have to get cut in. But that's just my 2 cents. Like I view the idea of like humans are already taking there's nothing new under the sun, and everything's an idea from somebody else. And, like there's only 12 notes, like you said. So this idea of like, we're not really creating anything new anyways. It's all an interpolation at the end of the day. So, I take the position of the more the merrier, the more creativity, the better. And, if I would rather be in a position of creating and exponential output than trying to chase who's using my things and for what. And that defeats the purpose of why I got into music. It was, I started sampling, and before I knew anything about copyrights, I was grading records and taking tracks and making beats out of them. And I was so proud, and I would listen to them and I wouldn't know how to make any money off of them or do what with them. But I was just like, I just created this really cool thing, and I think that essence with me remains the same.
Okay. Well, that being said, how do you feel about what's almost standard practice now, where anybody that's in the room while something's being created gets credit? So you can have 20 songwriters on a track. How do you feel about that, given what you just told me?
I think that everybody who's in the room contributes to the creative output, unless they're like an intern and they don't say a word. But even then, I mean, I think the creative output at the end of the day is a collaboration process when you're making the records. And I think that, like, yeah, sure, whoever's involved in the process in that moment should reap the rewards. But I think it's a momentary thing. I don't think it's like, well, I also, learned that melody from a song in 8th grade, so we should also credit that person. And that person probably also learned it from somebody else 20 years before them, and so we should credit them. Because then you just end up, it's 7 degrees of separation. You end up crediting the entire world. So I think it's more of like a, in the moment based thing. Who's working on the project, who's working on the song, deserves the credit that they're working on it with.
Okay. Let's go back to your background then. Tell me how you get into the business, because you've had an interesting journey here.
I got into the business through interning. Out of high school, I ended up going to SAE, which is a music school in Florida. And then from there, just interned at 3 different studios in Florida, Hit Factory, like some of the big studios, just knocked on a bunch of doors. And so I was interning at as many places as I could while I had like a job at the Apple Store or Starbucks or wherever I was doing it. And through that process, just kind of looking for any opportunity that I could find that was coming my way. And at the time, in one of the studios I was in, Jason Derulo was coming in. I heard he was coming in, and I was like sweeping the floors. So I decided, maybe that day I was talking to one of the engineers who was like, it takes 5 years to become an engineer and you got to pay your dues. And I was just like, I'm not about to wait 5 years. So I ended up, while I was sweeping the studio, putting my beats on the computer and like making a little folder called like Beats for Jason, and like, knew a little bit of coding enough to like make the folder bigger. So it like was really visible. And then left for the night. Came back the next day, got called into the boss's office, was like, who put the beats on that computer? I was like, oh man, I'm about to get fired. And then luckily Jason's engineer was like, oh, that was you? Like we recorded some songs to that. Come listen. And like, it was just kind of that was just how I got into I bypassed 5 years of hell interning, and then got right into production from there. And then from there, got a couple placements with them, moved out to LA, did the songwriting circuit for a while, did the artist thing for a while.
Okay. Well, so you're in Florida and you're in some of the big studios already. So were you from Florida?
Yeah, I grew up there.
Okay. So you're comfortable because you're at home almost. And what made you? I know the business is in LA and everything, but sounds like you could have stayed there. What made you come out here?
It's a great question. This songwriting circuit, I was really into pop songwriting and production. Florida was like a hotbed at the time. This was like early 2010s. So like where I was interning at was like, Lil Wayne had just launched Young Money-ish. DJ Khaled was there. And so I did the rounds as a hip hop production, and had some success in it. I just really wanted to get my hands on like how songs are really crafted and that side of things. And that's really where LA shines, is just like the pop songwriting techniques. And so, yeah, I came out here with that kind of expectation of like, I'm going to really learn the craft and work with some of the great songwriters, as many great songwriters as I could.
Did you have a hard time breaking into the clique out here that we have?
No, I came in and I always disguised myself as an engineer. And because of that, it would allow me to get into rooms that most producers wouldn't be able to get into, because I wasn't trying to sell my beats. I was just like, hey, I'll come engineer your session for free. I have credits, so like I can show you my mixes, and everybody needs a good engineer. So that's kind of how I would always, like, my strategy for getting into rooms was always just like get in as an engineer and then gain the trust of the people in the room and then be like, well, why don't we move this hook here and why don't we use this snare, and would eventually end up producing on the record.
Wow. That that's a good strategy.
It worked.
That's very cool. Yeah. The reason why I asked that is I have a lot of friends that have moved to Nashville from LA, and a lot of them moved back. And they say, well, it's really hard to break in, even though these are people with massive credits. People are nice, but they won't let me in. And then same thing with, I can't make any real long lasting friends because if you didn't grow up there, you're not part of the family, so to speak. But LA is not like that. It's much more melting pot.
It is. It's much more melting pot. And like I said, I always took the strategy of like, if everybody's walking through the front door, where's the side door? Where's the back door that I can walk through that is a lot less crowded? And so like that mixed with kind of like being in LA at the right place, right time, having the right records, I guess, and the right sound help. But yeah, and for anybody upcoming, that would be my one suggestion is how do you walk through the door that nobody else is walking through, and in a disarming way, and prove value and gain trust.
What was your best experience doing that?
Oh man, so many. Best experience doing that. I remember we used to, I could tell you the story of how 7-Eleven came about, which is the Beyonce record we did. And that was like a good example of just kind of walking through the other door, and basically like, the way it came about is, everybody was pitching Beyonce at these camps and doing like the traditional way of selling records, and me and a writer that I was working with at the time, we came up with this idea of renting out a house on the hills and setting up a studio in there was like a movie theater room in there, and setting up a studio in there and then inviting everybody to the house and throwing a party. And while everybody was partying at the house, mix in the records that we had for sale. And so everybody was at the house. We were playing like Young Thug, I'm a Stoner at the time or something, was like the hot record. And I remember like seeing everybody kind of dancing and like spilling their drinks or whatever. And so I ran into the studio room and like created a quick beat around that tempo, and then had everybody come into the room and basically had the writer that I was working with like just jump on the mic and start like explaining what he saw in the room. So like there was like a bunch of girls dancing and one was waving her hand. So like the lyric was like, hands up in the air, blah, blah, blah. Or like somebody dropped their alcohol literally. And so he was like, don't drop the alcohol. And so it was literally like a line by lines visual, see what I'm seeing, and I'm going to put it in the lyric. And then later that night, Beyonce came over. We played it for her, like as if it was like a party anthem, and everybody was like doing the hand wave. And so like the record kind of sold itself, but it was just the idea of like, how do we create the most authentic version of this song, as opposed to like pitching it through an A&R and then trying to get it up the food chain and a bunch of gatekeepers. And so like things like that always worked for me. It was just like figuring out how to get the artist into the world of the song, because when you're pitching, it's always like, I have a sad song for Rihanna, and so I have to also cross my fingers that like she's having a sad day, and can it connect with the lyric,
Right.
or the three gatekeepers that hear it before her do that, and so it's how do you get artists to the place where the song means the most to them or to you and to them. So like, yeah, that's a good example of just having fun making music, figuring out how to do it.
You're a clever guy, Sidney. Jeez.
I try, man. I try.
Very cool. All right. Tell me about Defiant.
Defiant was I guess, incubator for products. It came about after we launched the Virtual Artist Chill Pill project, where, like I had mentioned, we were doing like a bunch of games and innovative marketing, interactive marketing things. And a lot of the artists that I were working with at the time in the studio, like, were asking me, well, how can you do that for me? Like, can I use the games or the marketing stuff? And so that's when we kind of created Defiant as like, a product hub for some of the non-music stuff that we were building out, uh, and and yeah, that just led us to launching the music video games. It led us to launching some NFT stuff. It led us to just trying a bunch of different innovative music marketing products. Um, and yeah, it was an amazing, I guess, 5 years of just really playing in the sandbox of where tech meets music and what's possible.
Okay, so that led to Recoup, right?
That did
Okay,
that
so
led me.
tell us about that.
So Recoup is what I'm working on now. It's like a AI agent platform for artists and labels. The big vision for it is basically a record label in your pocket. My version of the future is AI agents are going to be able to do what you can do digitally, what any human can do digitally. Um, so, and probably at scale and 10 times better because they don't sleep and they're very efficient. So we're just building a platform where it basically can do the work of a major record label, but with AI agents instead of humans. The general idea is like, how do I empower artists to have the power of a major label without the need of giving up equity in their masters, giving up, uh, spending tons of money, building a huge team, and helping them leverage AI in a way that lets them be creative more.
Yeah, when I looked at the website, I came away thinking this was more a B2B product for record labels.
We're starting with B2B for record labels. The reason why is because the infrastructure for labels right now is set up in a way that, well, I guess the best way I can put it is indie artists, I don't know what they don't know. And so labels currently have the infrastructure set up where they understand the value of a marketing budget, where most indie artists don't even go there. They're just trying to figure out, how do I get my music heard? I don't have a budget, right? And so we're positioning it as a B2B project initially. And that's in order to prove concept of these agents can perform the jobs of major labels, and what a 30-person marketing department can do, AI agents can also do for a tenth of the cost, right? And then once we do that and scale that product, then it's opening it up to every other artist and any other creative. I think that over time, over the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more people making music, uh, and because of the way that AI is coming into play. Like, what is now 10 million indie musicians is going to turn into 100 million indie musicians, because you don't need to learn an instrument or a DAW to create music. And all of those people are going to need marketing and ways of figuring out how to monetize the creations that they're making.
But Sidney, just philosophically speaking, is that a good thing? Well, I mean, not what you're doing, going
Yeah, I understand what
from,
you're saying.
yeah.
In general, is it just is
Yeah,
that a good
yeah,
thing?
yeah, right. Having more, more creators, especially more non-technical creators.
I think it's a good thing. I personally do. The way I kind of look at it is, 10 years ago, you would have said, is it a good thing if every person had a news platform, or a mouthpiece, and that probably wouldn't have been a good thing, but it's what happened. And it empowered a lot of people to like be their own creators, make a living on themselves. And, so like, did YouTube change the entire media landscape? Yes. Was it a good thing or bad thing? I mean, it's the way it was. And so I think however you can whatever we can do to turn it into a good thing, a positive for society. And I see the same thing happening for music is people, 100 million people are about to be able to press a button and make a really cool song. And so the consumption of how does that play off of fan bases? How does that play off of monetization? How does that play off of like, the art form? These are all questions that are going to go unanswered. But the real question, and what I always go back to is like, my son is 2 right now and he's 10, like, and he's able to press a button and make a hit album in 10 seconds and share that with his friends. And they're going to be able to listen to those songs, like what is the value of a superstar at that point? What is the value of a hit song? Like everything changes, but what will not change is he's going to have fun making music. People are going to have enjoy listening to it. And so figuring out the monetization and distribution efforts around that, I think is the key of the next 2 to 5 years.
One of the things that just never seems to change is people are really good at creating things and they're not really good at selling and marketing. And I mean, this has always been, as long as I've been in the business, you'll find people making an album and go, okay, now what do I do with it? And it's no different now where, yes, it's fairly easier to make something, but you still have to get it out there. And the competition is, more so than ever before. So that's why, what you're doing is something that's more needed than I think people understand.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. You see the vision. I think that the music industry currently is still skewed by the success metrics of Billboard, similar to how the movie industry was. It's currently being shifted now, where you see like the box office sales aren't the metric anymore, and I think the music industry is slowly getting into that funnel where it's like the Billboards are charts are not the end all, and soon to be Spotify charts are not going to be the end all for like what that's going to show you what a successful master recording looks like, but it's not going to, or at least in the eyes of a label, but it's not going to show you like what it means to be a professional musician. And I think that's just like nowadays, it's, you can be a content creator and have 100,000 people who like watch you religiously and buy the stuff that you put out and listen to every word, and you have influence over those 100,000 people. And that's all you need to make a really, really good living as a content creator. And I think like that idea hasn't translated to the music industry yet, but it's about to.
What's funny is 10 years ago, was it? It might be longer, where it was all you needed was 1,000. So it was the 1,000 fans. You got 1,000 hardcore true fans. 1,000 true fans it was an article that came out and it really, set the mindset for the whole industry that you only needed 1,000. And you're talking about 100,000. And yes, it's true because the numbers have scaled so much so. Everything is, different. How we make money as musicians is scaled. It's way different than it was before. So that makes sense. You just struck me when you said that, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, it is different now, isn't it?
It's way different. I mean, I think that 1,000 true fans still exists. I think it's still a valid point. I think that labels don't agree because it's not the adage of like all you need is 1,000 true fans makes sense for the artist to make a living, but like a label can't make. It makes no sense for a label to invest in an artist with 1,000 true fans and to sell 1,000 copies of their album or whatever. But unless they have a 360, but even then, but I mean, it also goes back to like like what is the demographic of that fan base and how much are they willing to spend per year on music, and like I think over the next 5 to 10 years, I think it's going to dawn on a lot of musicians and from the traditional music makers that are not using AI to the new ones who are just using AI, at the end of the day, all they really are small businesses. That's not all they really are, but from a business perspective, they're small businesses. And so treating it as such of like, okay, cool. How do I optimize as a small business, all of my revenue channels, make sure I get the best deals possible, make sure that my distribution is optimizing my customer base. Like all of these questions that, small businesses go through, I think artists are going to start to have to ask those questions. And I just want to make sure they're informed, and I want to make sure that they're able to, they have the tools and the team, or in this case, the AI agents that can help them achieve, just make a living doing what they love. I think that's at the end of the day, what I really want for people is, just if you can be happy making a living doing what you love, then I'm all for it. And that's what I want to help more people do.
As they would say, making a living is the new success.
Yep.
That's really true. All right. Couple more questions, Sidney. So what's the one thing that you wish people knew about what you did that they don't get?
That the genie's out the bottle. That the genie is out of the bottle. And like, no matter how much you're opposed to something, if it's, you can't, like, we're not going to stop AI. Like, it's not going to happen. It's like the internet. Like, it's people back in 96. If you would have been like, I don't like the internet, I'm not that thing's going to go away. It's a fad. 20 years later, like, you're dead wrong. And it's the same exact thing with AI right now. So what I wish is for, if people had a more open mind about the fact that it's inevitable, it's already here. And so, like, use it as a tool in your arsenal to achieve the goals that you want, as opposed to treat it like a threat and not use it at all.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. What's the best piece of advice that you ever received or maybe you learned along the way?
Oh, that's a great question. To get addicted to the feeling of being outside of your comfort zone enough so that you search for it when you don't have it. So that was like a really profound thing. My dad actually said it, because whenever you do new things, you get that butterfly feeling in the pit of your stomach when it's something that is either new or you've never done it before. It's out of your comfort zone. It's always that feeling in your chest or butterflies in your stomach. And most people get that feeling and like don't ride the roller coaster. They're like, oh, I don't. That's not a good feeling. But it kind of changed my entire perspective when it was like, search for that feeling. If you don't have that feeling, then you should have a red flag. Like, oh, I need to go do something to get that feeling. And I think that's a really game changer for me, because it made me seek out uncomfortable opportunities and go through those doors that 99% of people wouldn't, and constantly move forward. It got that advice got me to where I am today.
That's a great piece of advice. This is episode 561, and so I've asked this of everybody. No one's ever said anything close to that. So good one. That's a good place to stop. Sidney, thanks so much for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you.
No, that was so much fun.
Cool.
If you need me for anything else, I'll be around.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.